That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Before we start this video, I want to thank you all who have sent me fan art of the Green Gay character over the past couple months. I keep all of them that I get sent. So if you'd like to see yours featured on one of my future videos, make sure to send me your fan art on Twitter. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT for updates on future content. Now, let's begin. When Maddy Morphosis was announced as the first straight contestant in Drag Race history, most of the reactions from people was that it was a terrible idea. It seemed like the platform of Drag Race was being used to favor a straight person, when to a lot of people should have been a spot that had been given to someone within the queer community. Others felt that Maddy, as a straight male, was sort of like the heterosexual community, trying to invade an art form that grew out of a need to establish a culture separate from that of the straight dominated world. That's why it's really surprising to see not just that she was able to get a good storyline in her time on the show, but also that she was able to create such a good connection with the fans in the year after her season finished airing. Even though the announcement of season 14 was in December 2021, it hits harder when you realize that in just a couple months it's going to be a full 2 years since this moment. Maddy's promo picture in itself is interesting because the choice to wear no wig and paint herself pink was a complete takeoff from the rest of the queens. She was a bald baddie, and we loved that for her. It was such a good contrast from her entrance look that was very straight of her, but also a clear indicator of the type of TV that she was about to deliver. And that was of an individual that wasn't really taking themselves all too seriously, which is why her talent show was in a way sort of a letdown. Maddy auditioned for the show a total of 3 times, making the 3rd time the charm. I'm not sure exactly what production was expecting out of Maddy going into her season, but she'd end up having sort of a rough start. On her first episode, she ended up landing in the bottom 3, mostly because her talent show performance consisted of her playing the guitar, which wasn't a good parallel to her personality or drag character. This is something that Maddy has admitted as one of her key mistakes in her run, because while she was preparing things going into the season, she didn't focus that much on her talent show, because she wasn't expecting it to be the very first challenge. So while she knew that she was going to play the guitar, she wanted to add a classic Maddy twist to it that would elevate the performance a bit. Yet upon getting there and realizing it would be the premiere episode, she didn't have any time to do anything that would enhance it, which is why she ended up showcasing what she did. Instead, if given the opportunity to do the talent show again, she would focus more on giving a performance that was based a lot more on trying to be funny rather than a sole talent, since at the end of the day it's about trying to make Rue and the judges laugh. Subsequently, that same premiere episode, Maddy was trying to keep her sexuality a secret in order to establish himself among the queens before she spilled her own tea. That was of course until Miss RuPaul entered the picture. Now, RuPaul basically telling the rest of the queens in the workroom that Maddy was in fact straight bothered me, but not because Ru supposedly outed her, which I'm not sure can be applied to straight people, but because I was low-key interested in following the idea of having the rest of the cast slowly find out the truth about her sexuality, since Diabetti was, to my knowledge, the only one that knew that Maddy was straight. It was also a surprise to Maddy herself that the other queens acted so shook by the news, when really anytime queens in her home state would find out that she was a hetero, they didn't really care all that much. It was sort of like a fun fact to them rather than a shocking revelation. Yet what's interesting is that despite this mask that Maddy had presented to viewers on the show, behind this was a person that came from a really small town in the state of Arkansas. When Maddy talks about her home city, she doesn't do so with a lot of pride. According to Maddy, most of the people here have closed-minded views, so it's no surprise that the only time the state gets any national recognition is because of its outrageous law that it makes regarding limiting the freedom of LGBT people. So then, how did Maddy, despite being straight, manage to gain the love that he has toward the LGBT community? Well, Maddy had been wanting to explore his identity for a good while. It wasn't until he graduated high school that he felt free to do so. I'd say that a common misconception about Maddy is that a part of the outrage against him getting on Drag Race came from people that thought he wasn't that educated about the drag scene at all, which is far from the truth. Like, Maddy had competed in many drag pageants, such as the Miss Gay US of A newcomer, and just like Drag Race, she didn't win. But she did make it to the top 12. Along with that, she had had been doing drag for over 5 years before the airing of season 14. And her whole purpose of getting into drag wasn't to get on the show, but mostly out of the admiration that he got from watching queens at bars and wanting to have the ability to express himself artistically. Something that he brought up was that there's a decent amount of conservative gay people in the South, which can be surprising to many people considering you'd expect queer people to be more liberal. But trust me, I've met my fair share of conservative gays, and it's really crazy to see them actively support a political party that is aiming to literally make their lives impossible. But anyways, by having all this background, Maddy, in a sense, was the perfect representative to go into Drag Race as the very first openly straight male contestant to compete. Some felt it was sort of ironic that the queer community that is based on love and acceptance had placed so much of an issue on Maddy being given the opportunity to compete on the show. The amount of backlash from the initial announcement of the season 14 cast, with many thinking he was appropriating gay culture, resulted in Maddy having to address the situation in an official statement that he released online. In it, he pointed out that straight guys can't be persecuted because they aren't an underrepresented group, and that he truly loves the art form of drag rather than trying to appropriate it. This whole situation is kind of crazy looking back at it, because right now, I'd say Maddy is one of the most celebrated queens in the fandom. But how did we get to this point? As mentioned before, the first episode, Maddy didn't do too good in the talent show, yet her runway look was something that I think dismissed any doubt that she in fact had a lot to offer this season. It was a very original look that for the most part hadn't been seen on Drag Race. She's also lucky that the very first runway she was able to showcase this, because it brought a lot of attention to the fact that Maddy did have a good degree of creativity, and she would go on to also show us how that creativity could go from an elevated look like this to even more elevated like this look. She could not only step out of the box in terms of what we expected from her, but also burn that box to the ground. I mean, her attention to detail on the makeup, the thought to bring a blow-up doll with her on the runway, it was all things that most people wouldn't expect. It's this constant defiance of expectations that made Maddy stick out from the judges. The funniest critique she got from the season was from RuPaul, when she told Maddy that there was something that was missing from her in her runway walks. Something that was like a flare, when really it seemed that what she wanted to say was that what was missing was the gayness. Yet then again, maybe it was just the fact that it was Maddy's first time on the show. When I first watched season 14, I didn't see Maddy as a queen who I'd want to see back on All Stars. But now that it's been a while, and from what I've seen outside of the show, I am very intrigued to see what she'd bring back to the franchise after gaining a bunch of confidence from seeing herself back on TV. Plus, she's also mentioned that something that held her back in her runway looks was just the budget. Because being that she was working at Target, she wasn't in a position to spend a drastic amount of money the way that some other queens do. While it's true that Maddy didn't necessarily deliver in looks for the season, she did show that she was skilled enough to survive in many of the challenges. I mean, it was sort of surprising just how far she got in her season. Because as soon as she landed in the bottom 2 along with June Jambalaya for the first elimination, my first instinct was to think that June was about to outperform her. But as soon as June's shoes came off and her dress seemed to be falling apart, it was very clearly going to be the first time that Maddy was going to win a lip sync. What followed was a couple more weeks where Maddy ended up surviving, but also a fan base that had yet again been proven wrong with her managing to win a lip sync. Mostly by default, but still, a win is a win. Over the course of the season, there was a lot of times where she wanted to be a lot more catty towards some of the other queens. However, his role as the first ever straight cis male contestant placed an invisible constraint for him by having one of his goals to be a good representative of the cis straight male people that do drag. Because he didn't want viewers to think he was overstepping his boundaries by trying to disrespect other queens in the room. So she tended to, in a way, always have the audience in the back of her mind. Which is a fair point to make. I mean, we all know how it would have panned out if it had gone any other way. The only time we really saw a more confrontational side to Maddy was in her final episode during Untucked, where she got into a small argument with Jasmine Kennedy by saying that she was going to outperform Jasmine if they landed in the bottom 2. Her fight with Jasmine Kennedy didn't seem the most genuine, at least for me, but what I do appreciate in this moment is that Maddy had the nerve within her to play to the cameras and create a conflict with another queen in that moment. Yet according to Maddy, what actually happened is that she may have had a little too many drinks in Untucked, and that her original comment to Jasmine wasn't meant to be disrespectful. Yet Jasmine might have taken it the wrong way and replied to her with a disrespectful statement, that in turn made Maddy take it the wrong way, leading up to them just outright arguing with each other. Essentially, the moment was sort of a mix of wanting to make some drama by starting conflict, genuine feelings in the moment, and of course, a lot more context that gets lost within the edit of the episode. Ultimately, Maddy would meet her fateful end after Jasmine Kennedy had mopped the floor with her in the lip sync, leading Rue to officially send off Maddy back to Arkansas. I feel that most of the looks she gave this season were very well put together aesthetically. But the only thing missing was that it was hard for me to really connect her drag to her drag persona. Subsequently, it's a season 14 reunion where it was very clear that she had refined her drag completely. Even the Elvis-inspired finale look was super high quality and fit her aesthetic very well. She'd also be the second recipient of the Golden Boot Award. That to this day, we don't know who exactly it is that decides who gets this award, because it's not the fans, it's not the queens, so I guess it's just the producers. Anyways, so then after season 14 was over, what was next for our dear friend Maddy Morphosis? A key thing for most Rue girls is to try to establish themselves within the fan base as fast as possible, so that they can have a stable platform that they can build off of in the years to come. Out of all the queens from season 14, I don't think anybody expected Maddy to dominate the scene the way she did. Her YouTube channel didn't take very long to take off. She started off as just reviews from season 15 that quickly turned into Maddy essentially starting her own interview series. Like any one of her interviews, regardless of which queen it is, ends up gaining a lot of attention from fans. Which honestly, there's not a lot of good interviewers out there for queens that are actually able to form a genuine connection with their guests. So someone like Maddy was very much needed. The only thing I'll say is that I desperately need Maddy to upload these interviews as podcast versions on Spotify, so I can listen to them on repeat while I'm at the gym. But that's another story. The success of his YouTube channel has created a need for Maddy to be the next host of the Pit Stop. But to be honest, even though that's something that I originally wanted to happen as well, it seems a lot better for Maddy to just create his own version of the Pit Stop on her channel. This rapid success she's having makes me very happy for her, because prior to Drag Race, Maddy was sort of struggling financially. Life sort of gifted him the opportunity to be on Drag Race and make a decent living for herself, as well as moving out of Arkansas and moving into Las Vegas. Yet the best part of all, now that her income is a lot better, she's been able to provide a better life to her two cats, whose names are Pickles and Beans. Pickles and Beans are now able to enjoy a lot more wet food, rather than the constant stream of dry food that they would get fed before Maddy made a name for herself and was able to quit that job at Target. What I was thinking about the other day is that we got a couple surprise contestants over the past seasons, with Gottmik as the first trans man, Maddy as the first straight contestant, and then Sugar and Spice as the first twins. I'm not sure if we have a contestant like this on season 16, but what I do know is that we haven't had a drag king. I'm not one of those people that feel the show should be required to bring drag kings on the show, but at this point, I don't see why they wouldn't bring a drag king to see how it plays out. Yet, how do you guys think this would play out? And do you think it's a good idea? I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Wendell Norris Realtor, Tyler Hendricks MD, Poppers Alberta, and Sari Tish. In the Gay Squad, we have Ethan Von Queer and Emma Malander. And in the Green Squad, we have Azure, Cayman Rider Furry, Franny Fishsticks, Edgar Allan Pup, O Nicole, The Only Sean, LP, and Soy Poblete. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Honestly, I recently quit smoking weed, and as someone that has been a daily pothead for like the past 5 years, it's a pretty big achievement for me. I think that's why I've managed to come out with so many videos over the past couple weeks, because I've pretty much been using this channel as a way to focus on something else that isn't smoking. Anyways, I appreciate you all that click on my videos, like them, comment on them, and even those that engage in the polls that I upload every day. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time.